Well, all right. Hello, and thank you all again for tuning into yet another episode of the Professional Pricing Society podcast. My name is Terrence, and in today's podcast, we have a very special guest with us by the name of Frank Luby. Frank has over 25 years of experience in pricing and over 40 years as a writer. And after an 8-year run as partner at Simon-Kucher and Partners, he co-founded Present Tense LLC in 2014 to help business professionals improve their communication. Frank also will be at our fall conference in Las Vegas this upcoming October to conduct his highly rated writing workshop. Frank, how are we doing today?
We're doing great, Terrence. Thank you. Thank you for having me. How are you?
Absolutely. Doing well, doing well. Thank you so much for being on this episode with us to talk about the importance of writing for pricing. Let's just go ahead and dive into this conversation because it's one of these topics that I feel like a lot of people could always sharpen their skill set in when it just comes to writing and just comes to, when you're a pricing practitioner, this is a strength that you really do want to have kind of in your back pocket. And let me ask you this, why is writing so important specifically for pricing practitioners?
Yeah, I think pricing practitioners, we often don't realize how often we write or need to write. We sometimes take it for granted. It's something that we do all the time, but we kind of forget that most decisions that executives will make, that people will make, are based on some form of written communication. That
Mm,
might have been delivered in person in a presentation, might be on a Zoom call, might be in a written document, but at the end of the day, it starts with something that's written down, that's organized, that's
mm,
structured. And I think, especially someone who's really into pricing might forget that, you might have the most robust analyses.
mm.
You've done a great job analyzing all your data, but you're not going to get anyone to believe in it, and you're not going to get anyone to act on it unless what you've written or what you prepared sets the right priorities, structured the right way, and especially uses the right words.
Good, good. Now, focusing on just specifically executives, what is, in your opinion, with your expertise and your insight, what is different when you prepare a story for them to hear or to read?
Yeah, I think the first thing is the stakes are higher. These are big decisions. These are company moving decisions. These are sometimes market moving decisions that they're going to make. So your margin for error in what you prepared and what you write is often a lot smaller when you're dealing with executives.
Mm,
And executives as an audience, they have less time. You need fewer words, and they also have stronger biases that you need to be aware of and that you have to overcome. The process is the same, but I think you just need to invest that much more when the executive is the one that's the audience for what you're writing.
mm. Okay, that's good. That's really good to know. And you make a great point because, executives tend to have, in your opinion, less time, to the point a little bit quicker. When you say know your audience, let's dive a bit deeper into that. Elaborate on what you mean when you say know your audience as it pertains to writing.
Well, I think if you talk to anyone that works in writing or helps people learn how to write, they're going to at some point that it starts with the audience.
Mm,
And in a lot of cases, you have to think of what you write as an individual communication. So you might see some statistics out there that say 60% of CEOs think this way, or 70% want this in their presentations.
mhm,
That means 30% don't.
mm,
So you need to know who that is on the other end of the call, on the other end of your document, and who's reading it. And you need to know them individually. So that means going beyond the job title and looking at that person as an individual and not the Facebook things. It doesn't matter whether they like sports or they have a cat or a dog or anything like that.
mhm,
It's about how much do they know about pricing? Are they
mm.
quantitative or are they qualitative? What are they are expecting from what you write, and what are their motivations? So really, at a business level, what makes them tick? How can you prepare something that really matches who that person is?
No, that's really good. Understanding what it is that moves the needle for that individual is it's what it sounds like you're saying that's going to really make the biggest impact in regards to writing for executives. Now, understanding the audience aspect, let's move forward to if you have any type of examples of what's worked when writing for executives and what hasn't worked in your experience.
Sure. Some of the things I'm talking about are hard-won battle scars, so to speak,
Mhm.
from really not having put in the homework to understand an audience. So, there's a CEO that I've worked with who wants two-page summaries and does not want a deck or a document that has more than 10 pages. So if you go
Wow.
beyond that, even in a slide presentation, you've lost him. He will literally leave the room.
Mm,
There's CEOs that'll ask you, "Would you bet the company on this?"
mm,
And I think that's a standard that, when we write things, sometimes we kind of forget is that you really have to think, would you make that same decision if you were in the CEO's shoes? Would you bet the company? Would you make that investment? Had CEOs say your work on profit's excellent, it's superb. We think in terms of market share. That's what we tell investors. That's what we tell our employees. So unless you
mm,
can reframe what you did in terms of market share for us, we can't use this.
mm,
And you'll run into executives, whether senior or junior executives, that have a mistrust for things. They don't like market research. So we
mm.
had one executive that was very attentive during our presentation and said, "Well, I need case examples. This is great, but for me, it's all theory. Market research, the findings, it's all speculative. You need to give me examples of how someone else has done something like this. And
Mm.
then you have my ear." So these are all things that you can learn in advance if you do your homework, whether you infer it from things they've said, things they've written, others that can help you get up to speed on this. It's just you need to know what that expectation is.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And you listen to these different examples just kind of makes it even clearer that you can write something very profound and very strong for an executive, but if that is not what moves their needle, if that's not what pushes, the pushes it forward, if you will, for the executive, you could still kind of miss the mark. And so, when considering writing as a pricing practitioner for the executive audience, I think it's really important to kind of compile this into steps. What steps would you say are the steps that need to be taken for a pricing practitioner to have success in writing for an executive audience?
Sure, I think that's a great question, and it's especially important because you'll see a lot of advice out there on what to do. And I think the most common example of advice is be clear and be concise.
Mm,
And that's very intuitive, and it seems to make a lot of sense. But no one ever tells you how to do that.
mm,
No one ever really walks you through what process will get you to something that's clear, that's concise, and also resonates, as you said, or moves the needle with your audience. So I think what I like to do, and this is something that will be elaborated on in a lot more detail in the workshop, is I break it down into 5 areas. It starts with
okay.
audience, like we discussed. The next part is meta level, and I'll explain a little bit about that in a moment. Purpose, structure, and word choice. That for me is the progression. So audience, besides knowing them, you need to bring a healthy respect for their time. And pricing may only be a small part of what they care about, even if it's 100% of what you usually care about. So there's
Hmm.
there's those asymmetries or disconnects sometimes. The meta level is something that I think a lot of people neglect, even some writers themselves, and it's what reaction do you want them to have?
Hmm.
How do you want them to, what mood do you want them to leave the room in? Do you want them to come up and say that was a good use of my time? Do you want to thank you? You're not necessarily going to see them, run out and sign some papers to, enact
Sure.
your pricing strategy at the end of the meeting. But you want to draw out certain indications from them, and the words you use and the structure is going to help do that.
Mm,
Purpose is not grander purpose or vision or anything like that. It's is what you're writing about to inform somebody or persuade somebody,
mm,
and that will guide how intensively you need to make your arguments. If it's just providing information, you may need to give a little more context, but not much. But if you're persuading, that's a whole different ball game, and that's when we get into structure. And it's interesting that what works in business is often exactly the opposite of what your English teacher taught you in 11th grade.
Sure.
We're taught to vary our words. We're learning vocabulary to take the SATs or the ACT. We vary our sentence structure and do all those wonderful things. And in business, I don't want to say it's more staccato, but we work in simple declarative sentences.
Hmm.
We work with the right grade level for our audience, and that could be very short and simple words. I think it was great. I think someone said that Jerry Seinfeld just gave a commencement address at Duke University that had only a couple words that had 3 syllables or more in them. So
Wow.
you can say a lot of things in a really compact way. Um, and you want to figure out build simple constructions, before and after. It's not this, it's this. We've been doing
Hmm.
it this way. We need to look at it this way. And those sort of sudden or jarring contrasts help it lock people in, change their perspective. And these are things you wouldn't do in an English paper, but
Sure.
they're
Yeah.
techniques that you really need to focus on in business writing. There's a couple additional rules I can get to if we have some time on how to structure these things. But the final one's word choice. And I like to use the analogy that words are like Legos. And if you got to go to the box and pick out the ones that are going to make your structure work or your
Hmm.
machine work.
Hmm.
And sometimes you have to pick the right word. I suggest people make a list of keywords that they need to build into the document, and those words will convey tone. Do I want to use the word success? Do I want to frame choices positively or negatively? All of these are things that words will help you do. So those are the 5 steps in kind of a quick overview.
Frank, I'm not gonna lie. I'm gonna be honest with you. I've never thought of writing in this fashion as far as, you can go pretty deep regarding, I mean, this is just 5 steps, and I'm sure there's more to this, but these 5 steps make you think a lot, make you think a little bit more in depth, as it relates to, how you want to speak to somebody in order to get them on board to wherever it is you are trying to take them. And so that is super interesting. Now I will say this. I've written articles before. I've written essays in school, and I've written different pieces of writing over the years. One of the things that's fairly common, not just with me and my experience in writing, but also just with other people that I'm familiar with that love to write, is a term what's known as writer's block. Now, what
Mm-hmm.
does someone do if they find themselves stuck in this, like a season, if you will, sometimes, of writer's block?
Yeah, I think we look at it in a couple ways. One is to think about why you're stuck,
Mm,
and that might help figure out which of the ideas I'm going to suggest might be the most helpful. But sometimes you're sitting there in front of that blank sheet of paper and you think you got too little to say.
mhm,
You look at your research, there's not enough popping out. You need to make more out of it. Sometimes you have too much to say,
mm.
and you don't know how to take all of. You could put a 300-page deck together for someone. How are you going to boil that down to 10 for that other
Sure.
CEO?
Yeah.
And the third part is you're not seeing the interconnections between things. You're not finding patterns and all of that. So it's usually one of those three things. So what I suggest to do, there's a couple things to get started. One is just to start talking out loud. One of my most helpful things to have on my desk is a little pocket recorder, and I'll just speak into that and say, if and in different situations, I meet my audience on the airplane,
Hmm.
and they say, "What are you working on?" How would I answer that question?
Yeah.
I see someone in an airport lounge. I meet someone, one of my colleagues late at night, and they're saying, "You've been sweating on this. What's the deal? What are you trying to do?" And sometimes in your answer to that, as incoherent as it might seem at first, there's little nuggets that you can pick up on or inspiration you can pick on to get started. The other thing I like to do is it's related to the keywords. Is there's something that I call 10-10, and that's
Okay.
10 keywords and 10 sentences. Just skip the fancy talk. Just try to write out. I've been assigned this problem. Here's what the CEO or the senior vice president is expecting. They're working on this, they're working on that. Here's three things that I found in my research, and just sort of step back from that for a moment and see if any patterns start to emerge from that very simple storytelling. And that gives you a foundation to start dressing up. It's kind of like building a house. You know, you need a little bit of a blueprint.
Hmm.
You put the sides up, the floor in, and then all of the stuff about grammar, making it fancy, making it look good, that all comes last. It's really important to just start those ideas flowing.
Gotcha.
The one final thing, if you're into that, I think the Michael Lewis, the famous author of many best-selling books,
Hmm.
likes to say, "Write on caffeine, edit on wine."
Nice.
So, meaning you need to get some ideas out quickly, force them out, get them on paper, but then step back, go for a walk, take a break, come back
Mhm.
to it, and see if you can sand it down, grind it down into something that's going to work for your audience.
Wow. Okay. That's good. Okay. So we've covered obviously your expertise and your experience over the years. We've covered general steps to take as it pertains to pricing practitioners writing for executives. And we've also even covered, some helpful tips that you can exercise if you find yourself in the season of writer's block. Now, is there anything else a pricing practitioner should do when they consider the totality of their writing?
Yeah, I can think of a couple things. One, building on what I just said with the editing,
Hmm.
is edit what you write aggressively.
Hmm.
And that means, don't play the devil's advocate, play the devil.
Hmm.
Really try to pick apart your arguments, and that helps you shore them up. You're not trying to depress yourself or get yourself in a bad state of mind. You're really trying to see, does this work? And
Yeah.
one way to do that is to swap roles. You know, I'll go so far sometimes as to send myself something I've written by email. So I'm the recipient now,
Oh, wow.
and I open it up and I look at it, and immediately just that physical act of looking at the document. Am I getting invited in?
Mm.
Does this look useful to me right off the bat? Am I, in the first or second paragraph, am I getting my attention? And in a lot of cases, you'll be like, oh my goodness, I'm glad I didn't send this to anybody. I've got to
Mm.
move some stuff around. I got to pull some stuff up to the front to get people's attention a little earlier. And the final thing is, especially for executives, you got to rehearse.
Mm.
That's you got to practice reading. If it's a presentation or a call, read it. If it's a written document, read it aloud and see if it flows, because that's I guess an advantage in some ways with executives is the more the writing is conversational, engaging, the more likely they are to respond to it. I know I said earlier we shouldn't generalize about CEOs, but that's a more or less a universal experience. So if it's tough to read what you wrote,
Mm.
there's a good chance you need to go back and work on it a bit, make it sound
Mhm.
a little more natural, and at their eye level.
Okay. Wow, this was good. This was really good. Now, I want to ask one more final question, then I'll let you go. But we are expecting you to be at our fall conference taking place in Las Vegas, in this upcoming October. And this podcast is serving as a teaser to your writing workshop, which I know is going to be very, very insightful because this podcast was very insightful. What can our
Thank you.
community expect from your upcoming workshop taking place this fall?
I'll go back to that concept of meta level that I mentioned to answer that. I think it's about gaining more confidence
Hmm.
in your writing. I think that's really the biggest thing. You'll leave the workshop with some practical tools, techniques that can help you make your writing better day to day,
Hmm.
and make persuasive writing more of a habit. That eventually this will become more of a natural way of doing things. It won't become a burden. It'll become an asset
Mm.
for you. And in the workshop itself, we'll go deeper into all of the steps I talked about today. But it won't just be me up front talking and talking and talking until the coffee break comes. We'll have little breakouts where you're applying what we talked about. I encourage
Nice.
people to bring something they're working on that they're stuck on, or that's upcoming in their own work and try to apply some of the things that we're working on in the workshop to that piece of work. And I think that really helps people see that this isn't a side topic. This is something they can really get a lot of mileage out of.
Sure, absolutely. Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, Mr. Frank Luby. And one more question for you. Where, for those who are interested, can they go to learn more about you, your company, and what you stand for?
Sure, I got a couple places they can go. One is my corporate website, which is Present Tense
Mhm.
LLC.com. Present tense, like in English class, present tense. And that gives an overview of the kind of work that I do. And we have a blog. It hasn't been updated in a little while, but it has a lot of really specific advice on a lot of issues.
Mhm.
And then more broadly, I do a lot of ghostwriting and I work as a writing partner, but I also write for myself. And I
Nice.
have a site called bluesandmore.net.
Okay.
And if you go to the blog there, there's some essays that I write from time to time, and that's a bit away from pricing and business. But I'm hoping you'll still see some of the things that I talked about today come through and how those are put together, and trying to just have some fun. And in that sense,
Mhm.
not that business writing isn't fun, but sometimes
Mhm.
you gotta got to do some personal things as well. So those would be the two places to catch up. In terms of general, there's two books I'd recommend: Elements of Style by
Okay.
E.B. White, and a book called Writing That Works. It's an older book by a gentleman named Ken Roman, and his partner is Joel Raffleson.
Okay.
And those books should be really inexpensive. I think you can pick them up anywhere. And they're quick to skim. They're great to have on your desktop, and they're extremely helpful.
Awesome. Okay. A man of resources as well, Mr. Frank. We want to thank you again for your time today, telling persuasive pricing stories to executives. Until next time, we'll see you all later. Have a good one. Bye bye.